So all of us are on, so we will jump in and get started. So let me just say thank you, Dr. Wyatt, for being with us and for choosing to enter into this process. I know it's sometimes an arduous process, and so thank you for being. Congratulations on being one of the finalists for our four finalists. Really excited about getting to spend some time with you here tonight. Thank you for providing all the necessary information we asked for and the TSB asked you for. So that was very helpful as well. And thank you for your patience as we have kind of walked through this, and especially in the middle of this COVID-19 outbreak. And we've had to kind of, figure out what do we do next, or how do we do this process. And even entering into this process tonight was a really big deal, and asking you to do something different probably than you've done as far as an interview process goes anyway. So thank you for doing that for us. So the timeline that we'll be operating on is we just finished one interview, and so we'll do your interview tonight, and then we'll do two more interviews tomorrow evening as well, and then we'll spend some time kind of digesting everything, and then we hope to get back and deliberate and make some decisions by next week. So we'll be following up with you and the other candidates as well on what that looks like. This will be broadcast out on some of our information stations starting Monday. And so this will be, since this is a private interview process in live time, it'll actually be available to the public beginning, I think, Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So we'll begin by giving you some time to tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that you want us to know that maybe you didn't put on your resume or in your letter to us, or anything pertinent that you should feel that we should know. And then each board member will kind of go round robin on how we ask questions and how we, so we'll ask them one at a time. We'll give you an opportunity to respond. There may be some follow-ups to each one as we go, but we'll kind of do a round robin kind of thing as that goes. And know that each board member will ask the same questions to everybody that comes. So you're getting the same questions that everybody is getting. So any questions about any of that?
No.
Okay,
that
awesome.
Sounds great.
Well, we're going to turn it over to you and let you get us started. I'll remind our board members, if you will, if you're not talking, if you'll mute yourself so we don't get a lot of background noise, that'll be great as well. So, Dr. Wyatt, we'll give it to you.
Excellent. Well, first of all, I just want to thank all of you. It's really impressive to be around a board that's so forward thinking, that you guys really jumped on this process to do this in this format. It's a new time for all of us, and it's nice to see a school system that takes that initiative. So I appreciate it. So just a little bit about myself, maybe that you didn't get from the resume. I've been in education 27 years, so I've worked a lot of different positions, both in Louisiana and in Tennessee. But what's really important in my life is I have a wonderful husband who's also a teacher, an educator, and my two wonderful sons. I have a son that is a junior at the University of Tennessee, and my younger son is graduating this year and will be joining his brother at UT. So I really have a great supportive family that I enjoy being around, and have enjoyed kind of going through the education process from both a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint. It's been interesting when you have a educator for a parent. I'm sure my sons would probably tell you that education's been in the forefront for most of their lives. So it's been exciting. I also have a passion for this. I am an adjunct professor at Lipscomb University, in which I instruct other leaders. So I work in both the doctoral program and the master's level leadership program there. So many of the principals across the district have been in class with me, and I really like keeping my craft fresh and new by continuing to do that work and mentor those students, and really keeps me up to date on current practices. So I enjoy that as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for a little bit of info on you. So we're going to jump right in and ask some questions, and so we'll start with Mr. Lamar. So, Mr. Lamar, you have the floor for our first question.
Thank you, Dr. Wyatt, for joining us tonight. My first question is, explain how would you develop a school system budget, and tell us what you would involve, who you would involve, and how you would involve them. Let me repeat that. Explain how you would develop a school system budget, and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it starts with your leadership. The principals really need to work with their staff to talk about what are those needs to make teachers successful in the classroom? What are those things that we really request and prioritize according to our district strategic plan, according to our school's mission? How do we prioritize those needs? So listening to the principals, getting that input from them, and then coming to the table to see, okay, where does this fit into our strategic plan? Where's the biggest bang for our buck for these things? How can we get resources directly to students, directly to teachers? Those are things that are important as I see it, a school budget. So not only do we involve the principals and the leaders in that discussion, but we also make sure that we are transparent in how those monies are spent, why those monies are spent the way that they're spent. And again, everything should be evidence-based in that budget, and we should have different focus groups working with myself in formulating those requests of what's needed. So I definitely want to hear from principals, and that's where I would start.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to Ms. Conley.
Hi, Dr. Wyatt. How have you implemented technology for instructional purposes?
So this is a subject near and dear to my heart, especially in the midst of our wonderful pandemic right now. This is something that I've been involved in actually every day. So I'm going to talk about it in a couple of different ways. The first way I'm going to talk about it is my current role. I work for the Southern Regional Education Board. And what we do is work across the country with school leaders and teachers in helping them integrate technology into the professional development that we use. So some of the things that we've worked on with regards to project-based learning, with regards to how we development data management systems, there's all types of different ways that we utilize technology with helping our schools improve that we're currently working with. As a district leader and as a principal, I was really, one of the goals that we set was that students would have an online experience before they graduated. So I worked with teams of teachers in developing blended learning models that were scaffolded so students had online experiences throughout their courses prior to taking an online class. Because in this day and age, one of the faults that I have seen in education is we know that students can have access to all types of courses online, but the issue has become we haven't taught them the skill set to independently work in those settings. So we really need to work on these blended learning environments, putting modules into place into certain courses where the teacher can work not only face-to-face, but actually teach the skill sets of working in an online environment. Another way that we've worked with technology is really helping teachers with professional development, asking teachers, what are those things that you can teach each other in using? Simple things like, Padlet and Quizlet and Kahoot and all those wonderful skills all those wonderful tools that keep students engaged in the classroom. We want to make sure that teachers have some excellent professional development around adding those things in, and not as an extra activity, but actually purposefully incorporated so that we can see the development of that lesson in a way that students are growing from those skills, not just a busy activity. Too often you see pull out your computer, pull out your iPad, and it becomes the activity rather than the instruction. So where I've worked with teachers is really developing lessons that use it as a means to increase achievement and increase learning and increase engagement rather than an activity in and of itself.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I've got a question for you. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the curriculum that we use at ACS, but I'll give you my question. You can kind of follow from there. What are your views about the current curriculum used at ACS, and how, if at all, would you change the curriculum?
So my current understanding, I am not too aware of current curriculum. What I would tell you is that my viewpoint of curriculum is it really lies with teachers. I use teachers as my basis for understanding what those curricular needs are. For me, it's more about how are we looking at standards? How are we looking at power standards? A curriculum is just a device or a mode of getting to those standards. So for me, we don't need to change it unless the teachers say this isn't working. If the teachers say this curriculum that we're currently using isn't getting us the outcomes that we're looking for, then we need to look at doing something differently. But with regards to the actual curriculum, for me, it all comes down to literacy, and that literacy comes in multiple formats. It's not just, everything's put upon an English teacher or an ELA teacher, but it's actually about digital literacy. It's about reading, writing, speaking, using all of those modalities of literacy, which really comes down to me to a project-based learning model. How are we getting to students so that they can critically think, problem solve through it, present their ideas, and there's not this one size fits all answer mentality. So for me, that's my answer about curriculum is I don't think one curriculum per se is the answer. I think it's about that personalization and designing what fits the needs of your students best and pulling from several different points of curriculum.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, just as a note, we will be kind of looking down. We're taking notes just so, again, I know we're kind of in a weird spot. So we maybe our faces may be off the screen or, look down like this or something, but we're taking notes over here. So just an FYI.
That's okay.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Williams.
Yes. Good evening, Dr. Wyatt.
Hello.
In your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees?
Mm-hmm. So I think, and one thing I do know about Arlington is it has a fabulous culture already. And I think that is so important to maintaining not only the level of high expectations, but it's that we enjoy working where we want to work, going to school where we go to school. It's a place that we want to come to each day. So in order to do that, I think we have to set up systems of communication, whether that be a teacher advisory group where teachers can do a year on the advisory group and different teachers can fill in so we hear different voices, but we need representation from that. We need to make sure that, in a district of 4 schools, I need to be visible. I need to be walking in these hallways. I need to be listening to teachers as they come across things that they want to say. So I think being visible, having set time systems of advisory meetings with the staff, also making sure that we have a system of getting survey feedback from them, and how we look at that data and what we do with that data, not just surveys for survey's sake, but actually have a way of saying you asked or you said and I did. So really responding back from what they've been asking for and what we're doing about it and why. So having those senses of communication. a two-way communication is important. And, a newsletter from me is fantastic, but that's one-way communication. So we have to have a way to get back and get that feedback in several different levels, at a teacher level, at a support employee level, at a principal level. So we would definitely have quarterly, monthly type advisory meetings, depending on the situation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Viox.
Dr. Wyatt, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I'll just jump into my question. Again, what the chairman said is it's note-taking time, so apologize for the eye contact. Most people that know me understand that I'm a huge proponent for legislative advocacy. I believe it is the single most important function of the board and the superintendent. Would you relate to us your legislative advocacy efforts with regards to your current job or capacity?
Sure. Thank you. I also think that's important. That is a key component to the work I do right now. I'm a director for several states. So I work closely with commissioners of education and departments of education to advocate not only for themselves, but to work with policymakers. Currently, twice a year, I sit in a leadership forum with state senators to work on education policy. This past year, I worked with the great state of Kentucky in helping them with their early childhood literacy policy recommendations that they were changing. And again, worked with principals, teachers, and legislators across the state to not only pull research from other states and what they were doing, but actually formulate some new changes in their policy with regards to early childhood literacy. So I think as a superintendent, that is definitely the role, especially in going to conferences like the TOS conference, like in different places like that, is really understanding what's going on across the state and advocating for our students and what they need. And that's something that I can tell you I would do without qualm. I'm very happy to do that and used to doing that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your answer.
Sure.
All right, well, round one complete. We'll move to round two, and we'll start back over with Mr. Lamar.
Okay, just one moment here. Okay, again, Dr. Wyatt, thank you for joining us this evening. Here's my second question to you. How would you work with the school board in the implementation of their strategic plan and policies?
Well, first of all, let me say that I have been thoroughly impressed with your current strategic plan. It's really well laid out. I was very excited to see that. I can tell you that as somebody coming in to apply for this job, it was really nice to see somebody who had a well laid out plan. But I think working with the school board on this is really, my job as the superintendent is to ensure those outcomes, to lay out midterm goals. So we have short-term goals and we can talk about those, talk about long-term goals, and keep the school board updated at all times. Every time we meet, where are we with those goals? So there's 4 main components of your strategic plan, and every time we should have some sort of update on where we are with those different teams when we're talking about it. We have to keep things moving forward. One of my biggest kind of concerns with people's strategic plans is we write these wonderful plans and then we talk about them every 6 months. And that's not me. It's a living, breathing document. And those people that are on those teams should be action oriented. We should have those small term goals leading up to those, and really talk to the school board about where we are, what barriers are we hitting, and why are we hitting those, and having those discussions so that we can really smooth out the path for the teams to work through what we've asked them to work on.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Ms. Conley. Ms. Conley, you might want to unmute yourself.
Okay. Excuse me. What community organizations or activities do you think the superintendent should participate in? And tell us which of these organizations you already participate.
So I'll flip that. I'll start with I currently work with ASA, and I'm a member of that superintendent's organization. So I think that as a superintendent, you have a responsibility to be a member of those both local, regional, and national organizations that not only help you with your own professional growth, but really take the school district out into the world and get those outside learning experiences, because that's the role of the superintendent, is to bring those learning experiences from other organizations back into the system so that we can better ourselves and constantly be looking at that our own growth. So I do highly believe in being members of, as a person, be a member of those organizations. On a community level, one of the things that I have strived to work on for years, when I worked in the Nashville public school system, I was a strong community advocate. I was a member of the Alignment Nashville organization, which looked at the whole child, K-12, and I helped with running some of those advisory meetings that we had. I worked with the Pencil Foundation, in which we brought in almost 400 business partners to the school district. So I think from a community perspective, the superintendent needs to be a part of those chamber advisory meetings, or setting up different types of advisory boards for industry partners, for post-secondary partners, and really be involved with bringing the community into our schools and getting that support from them. So that would be the other component of that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, so what do you believe is the most important qualities for a principal to possess?
So the most important qualities that a principal or a leader of an organization should possess is, first of all, they're taking responsibility. They need to be able to own things, take their own responsibility of their building, of their school. Leaders who play the blame game, that it's somebody else's fault, is not something that we want to look for. We want to look for people that really are reflective of their own practice, that they're understanding, that they're willing and able to take notes and grow from experiences. I think also we're looking for someone who's not afraid to fail forward. It's okay to try something, to have initiatives, to implement new things if it's for the betterment of students, but also someone who knows how to monitor those things to make sure that we're not continuing to do things we don't need to do anymore. A leader, a principal of a building has to have that. I kind of call it the X factor. We know there's a science to education. There's a playbook. We know that, but there's also an art to education, and they need that social awareness of what's going on around them, valuing the rest of their team, understanding their team's strengths, and building the capacity of their team so that they understand that even though they have the title of principal, they are the principal teacher. They are the principal teacher of that building, which means that they are responsible for helping everyone be leaders in that building, not just themselves, and they can't do it on their own. If they think they can do it on their own, then they wouldn't need anybody else. So I want to make sure that they understand how to do that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Williams.
Dr. Wyatt, explain what you have done or will do to build and maintain a good relationship with the school board.
I think having a good relationship with the school board is key to any school system's success. I know bad relations can really derail the primary objective, the focus of what needs to happen. So I think first and foremost is setting that understanding that students are first, that our own issues are second to that. So we really always need to keep that in the forefront. I think one of the ways we do that is have that open line of communication. We need to understand, you know, when it is that we're communicating back and forth. What are those modalities of communication? What are those expectations from each one? I would love to hear that from you all, and from you all to tell me, what are your expectations of that? What are mine? And I think setting those norms and holding each other to those norms is really key to that relationship. Just really being honest about what our needs are on the front side of this is extremely important. I think also, I say this with any team, any healthy organization needs to be able to have a team of people who can agree to disagree. And it's okay that we might have something that we don't agree on, but when we leave the room, we've made a decision and we're going forward with that decision. And we are going to do what the group decided, and we're not going to look back on what could have been or what we wished had happened. It's going to be that decision and move forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Viox.
Thank you, sir. These are uncertain and challenging times for any superintendent with regards to some of the recent governor and commissioner of education decisions that have sort of demeaned the job that our teachers and administrators are doing. As teachers become more responsible for student-related issues like mental health, multiple medical conditions, poverty, drug abuse, etc., tell us what your plan is to prove to the state how the public school system is succeeding in this kind of an environment.
So Dale, I'm going to ask you if you can just repeat that one more time, because I want to make sure I heard one of the words that I heard, please.
Sure. You want the whole thing or just the actual question?
Well, the actual question, yes.
The question is, tell us how you will fight this type of adversity, and what is your overall plan to prove to the state legislature that public school is successful on many levels?
Thank you. So you were exactly right. This has been a very challenging time for public education. I think, honestly, one of the things that a lot of us have laughed about in our texts and Facebook memes have been that a lot of people around the country are figuring out that teaching's a tough job finally through this pandemic. And although we joke about it, I honestly think it's going to change the opinion of a lot of people after we come through the other side of this about how we should value teachers. And I think we should use that going forward to really help people understand the value of what public school teachers do. One of the ways that I think, some of the adversity is not giving teachers the resources they need at hand and expecting more. You can't put more on somebody's plate without taking something off their plate or without reorganizing the plate. So one of the jobs that we have as leaders, again, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. I don't believe in playing the blame game. What's going on with them is what's going on with them. And yes, we need to advocate for what we're doing, but at the same time, our job is to filter that for our teachers so that they don't feel that stress. They don't feel that adversity. And how we do that is really prioritize what's going to make them feel good about coming to work each day and what's going to help them with their job. So if that is their online digital tools that they need, or if that is changing a process or a schedule or the way that we ask them to turn in something on a deadline, those are things that we need to look at to take those little stressors off of them so that they can get to the job that they're trying to get to. So I think there's two sides to that question. There's one side that we should never give up fighting. I think we need to consistently give them that feedback of this is what's working, what's not working. But we also need to tell them that in this day and age, what public educators are doing right now really can't be replicated. It is a gift to go to school. It is a gift to be in the settings that they're in right now. And just because, and we have examples, there's evidence of that in other districts that we can talk about later of schools, charter schools coming in, taking over districts, and they're not any more successful necessarily. So changing out people is not necessarily going to be the answer. It goes back to the old adage of working smarter and not harder, and we've got to help them figure that out, regardless of what's going on around them. We have to help our circle of influence and protect our teachers.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Lamar, question 3.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wyatt. What steps would you take to ensure school funds are spent wisely and accounted for properly and in compliance with state and federal mandates?
So we've got to make sure that, all of our, again, I'm going to go back to that strategic plan. Every part of our budget should be tied to an item in our strategic plan. And so we know they're being used wisely if they are directly related to an outcome that we're measuring. And I think that how we do that is figuring out those benchmark steps. Are we meeting the outcomes that we are trying to push for? And if we're not, then we need to look at allocating that money differently if it's something that's not working. We've got to make sure that we are in compliance, obviously, and that it comes down to making sure that we have procedures and processes in place with regards to, everything from teachers holding money to, making sure that we have a system where people are held accountable for dealing with those funds appropriately. So I think really working on looking at what are those forms, what are those process, what are those due dates that we have built in the system so that we can take a look on how that money is coming in and tracked. I think also we need to look at alternative funding and braided funding. How well are we using grant funding? How well are we using our title monies or our Perkins monies? So are we able to use money from several different sources for one initiative to make it a stronger initiative? So I think that's another thing that we need to take into consideration, and making sure that if everything is coming, if certain things are coming out of certain pots of money, sometimes it becomes disjointed and it's not a clear picture. So we need to look at how that funding is being used in a holistic approach.
Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Sure.
Ms. Conley.
Yes, sir. What have you done to improve the teachers' and students' knowledge and use of technology?
So I believe in practicing what you preach. So if I expect teachers or students or principals or whomever the audience is to use a piece of technology, then I'm going to use it in a meeting, or I will use it in a way that it can demonstrate the way it should be used or could be used. I also think one of the ways, for example, now I've been teaching courses for Lipscomb in Zoom for several years now. And so I also want to encourage them when I'm helping them with technology is making sure that they remember brain-based teaching techniques, that they are actually, not just teaching, because in the format, like, for example, the format we're in now, you can become just as disengaged as you could in a regular classroom, because in fact it's easier. There's all kinds of things that distract you in a format like this. So you need to make sure that if I was teaching using technology, that I'm building in those, how am I being reflective? How am I building questions and time for peer interaction? How am I building breaks? How am I chunking the material so that it's not just sitting in front of a computer for long periods of time? So I think really helping them become those instructional designers of lessons utilizing it is one of the ways that I've worked with teachers when they've built out modules for their classes.
All right. Question for me. Do you have an idea how you would staff the central office and in those positions, and what and who might those people be?
Interesting. So first of all, I'm obviously I'd have to look at what the current budget entails. I looked a little bit at the budget, but I didn't see all of the different positions. But first and foremost, we need an instructional person, obviously, at the forefront. I know that you have an exceptional technology department already. Russell's been absolutely fabulous in working with him, and I think you guys, just by your website and things, you can see that you have it well staffed. But I think that instructional focus is crucial. So that would definitely be a key component of central office staff. I think the second component of that, well, and of course, with regards to that, I would like it one elementary and one secondary focus person. So that would be my wish if I was creating a wish list. Obviously, it's within budget constraints. But the second part of that is someone who really has a close look on social emotional learning, and a close look at those exceptional needs for students with disabilities, needs for our English learner population. So any of those, we need a central person that can really support our students from a whole child perspective. So that would be another central office staff person that I find crucial. Of course, as well as your human resources and an operations person as well.
Yeah, the second part of my question talked about if you had ideas of who those people would be. I don't know if you know people in those areas or are familiar with any of our staff or any at all like that.
So thank you for clarifying. So I'm a believer in assessing the strengths of the people that are in the district first. So I would really want to make sure, first of all, do we have vacancies? I don't believe in just changing people out. Everyone would have a period there where we're definitely looking at those strengths and those abilities of who has leadership capacity in the entire district. Secondly, though, at the same time, I think that I have a wealth of knowledge of people across the state that can support us in any of those areas. So if that came to pass, we can look at that as well. But I would definitely start with having a leadership pipeline built within our own district first.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Williams.
Dr. Wyatt, we've talked about a lot of things, but just wondering if there's something that you would like to talk about and tell us about that we really haven't touched on at all.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things, and it's in my resume, but sometimes I like to tell the story because I think the story is a little bit better. But I really like to talk about my experience. I have two different experiences I'd like to share with you. One as a principal. First of all, I was a high school principal of a school of 3,000 students. So that's getting close to almost the district size. And so this is something that I'm very familiar with working with large staffs, with understanding how to implement a change in a large setting. So the school that I was principal of at the time was actually in a position of being under state takeover. So that when I went into the school, I had to do a complete change. We had to build a strategic plan from scratch. We turned the entire school into a career academy model. And by the time I left that school to go to the central office, it became a reward school in the state. So I have experience with change management. It's one of the things that I feel like is a strength of mine, that I do love working with teachers on helping them manage new initiatives and changes that may come about, and also keeping that focus on achievement, because we were able to do that. From a second perspective, when I moved into the central office role, I supervised 25 high schools and 30 middle schools. So that is a huge scale. And I know, you guys are probably thinking, well, we only have 4 schools. But I say that to understand that I worked really hard at building a leadership pipeline and enabling those school principals to support them through coaching them and building the capacity of their teachers. So it's something that I firmly believe in, is helping people be the best they can be. And that's something that I've worked hard at throughout those settings. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I've been able to implement a strategic plan on a large scale model with success.
Thank you, Dr. Wyatt.
Sure.
Dr. Biox.
Yes, Dr. Wyatt, I'm just going to throw this question out there and let you take it wherever you want. How do you demonstrate ethical behavior?
So I think for me, one of the courses I teach is law and ethics, educational law and ethics. And so we spend a lot of time about not only knowing board policy, starting with board policies, starting with Supreme Court cases, going through and knowing your legal stance. But once you know your legal stance, then also knowing your ethical stance, what it is that you value, and when are your own values incongruent with the values of the organization. And I think that's really important to understand that. When I think of ethical behavior from a superintendent standpoint, I think of walking the talk. I think of making sure that if we say we're going to do something, that I'm the first one to do it. That if I say that I expect something, that I'm the first one that has to do it before somebody else does. I think that's part of acting ethically. I think also, for me, my value system is such that if someone asked me to act unethically, I have 2 choices, and that is either to call it to the attention of others, or that it's time for me to leave that situation if someone's asked me to do that. So I've been through a situation like that, and I'm very confident in my own ethical values and my belief system. So I feel like that isn't an issue for me, that acting ethically and responsibly is something that I stand on and will fight for.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Sure.
Hey, well, thank you, Dr. Wyatt. That is, I appreciate your time in this. Is there anything else you want to tell us before we kind of wrap this up here?
I just want to say that your community is exceptional. Its reputation precedes itself. You have a fabulous, not only a fabulous place to live, but wonderful people in that community you work with. You have some top-notch teachers, some top-notch programs. I think most people would probably say, well, why do you need a top-notch superintendent if everything is going so well? And what I like to say to that is in the blink of an eye, things can change. It takes 3 to 5 years to implement something, 5 to 10 to see sustainability, and probably about 1 year to take it apart. And so I always tell people that you have to constantly be forward thinking and not just be happy where you are, but always looking at how we can do better. So we need to celebrate our success. We need to enjoy each other and what we do, but we always need to be looking forward on continuing to improve. And I think one of the areas that even though you guys are probably one of the best districts in the state, we can really work on those early post-secondary opportunities for our students and streamlining those internships, those certifications, those opportunities for them to really be well-rounded and come back to our community with those after they've attended post-secondary with those skill sets. So I think we just always need to keep looking forward. So I would say that I want to just thank you, number one, for your time this evening and tell you that your community is very exciting to me to work with, because I think you have a great foundation, and I think that you can really go even further, because when you have great talent, there's nothing left. There's nothing that you can't do. That's for sure.
Awesome. We feel the same way about our town, for sure. Hey, well, look, thank you for your time. I know there was a lot of time involved in preparing and getting ready and providing all the things that TSB asks you for in the middle of all the things that you've got going on. And so being a late night with us, I really appreciate your time and giving us and answering our questions thoroughly. And so we'll talk about this and deliberate within our own board, and then I'll follow back up with you at some point next week for sure.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate that.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. It's great to spend some time with you.
You too.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.